Today we're looking at what happens to a good, a single good, when income for a person or overall in an economy begins to rise, or if it begins to fall. We call this concept YED, and the Y is just shorthand or the abbreviation we use in economics for income. I is taken by investment, which is something we'll talk about later on. The terms that we're looking for, or really what we're trying to decide, is would we call the good a normal good, or would we call it an inferior good? If it's a normal good, we can further break it down to a necessity good or a luxury good. Both of these are a subset of being a normal good. For an example, we're going to use somebody who's making $200 a week. Now, your typical working year is 50 weeks. So this is going to come out to $10,000 a year. So, depending on where you live, that's maybe okay, but in most industrialized countries, this would be fairly low. So what we're going to see is they're going to start off, this is going to be their weekly budget. They're going to pay $100 in rent. You can imagine they probably don't live in a very nice place if they're only paying $100 a week of rent. They subsist entirely on pizza. We had to do it for the example, so they buy 15 pizzas at $5 each. They get around by buying one bus pass a week. Each week, a bus pass costs $20. We can assume that to earn their money, they have to travel a relatively long distance, further than they can walk. So they have to have the bus pass to get around. After all that's said and done, they have $5 left over a week, so they're getting to work and they have food and shelter. We'll pretend they have clothes. And the only other thing they do with their money is the extra $5 every 2 weeks, they go to see a movie. Apparently this person really likes movies. So that's their one sort of extravagance. Well, they've been a good worker and they're gonna get a 10% raise at work and they're gonna make $220 a week now. Let's see what happens to the spending categories that we saw. With $20 extra a week, it's unlikely that they would be able to rent a nicer place. Maybe they could, and maybe some people would. This person, however, we can see from the changes, this person doesn't see rent as that important a thing. So they're not actually going to make a change with that. It's important to note too that some things that come in kind of big chunks like rent, you can't just buy like $1 more worth of rent, where you can go buy $1 more of apples or something like that. But things that tend to come in big chunks, they obviously are going to react differently than things that tend to come in smaller chunks. Okay, maybe the 15 pizzas weren't quite enough and they would like a little bit more food, so they upped that intake to 16 pizzas a week, so that spending goes up to $80 a week. This is a change of 6.67%, all right? Now we notice they stopped buying the bus pass, so they go from spending $20 a week for one bus pass to $0 a week for 0 bus passes. So that's a 100% change, and it's a negative change. Again, just like we saw in cross-elasticity of demand, keeping the positives and negatives reveals an important relationship here. Finally, instead of buying half a movie or going to a movie every 2 weeks, they're going to buy 3/4 of a movie. We're assuming a movie price is $10. So they're going to go to 3/4 of a movie, which means they're going to be able to go to 3 movies every 4 weeks instead of 2 every 4 weeks. So that represents a 50% increase. The last thing we'll point out is if you total up the numbers, we're not to 220 yet, and that's because they still need to get around, but now they're going to choose to do it in a nicer way. So instead of buying the $20 a week bus pass, they're going to buy the $32.50 a week subway pass. Convenient how it costs just $32.50, right? Okay, when we do the mathematics for YED, the formula is here. And just like in everything else we've done, we're going to have quantity on top as the numerator. And here we have income as the denominator. Now notice we had price before, which has to do with money. Well, income also has to do with money. So in all of our examples, we're going to have quantity on top and something to do with money on the bottom. When we run these numbers, what we'll find obviously there's no change, so there's nothing to say here. But for the pizzas, we take 6.67, the percent change in quantity demanded, and divide it by 10%, the percent change of income. And that's going to give us a value of 0.67. Remember, we have 6.7% over 10, so it's a small number over a larger number, so it's going to be a decimal. Here, we have negative 100 over 10, so that's going to give us a value of negative 9. And again, the negative there is very important. We want to make sure we keep that. Here we see 50% over 10%, so that's positive 5. And here I'm not really sure how exactly to do it because your percent change is, 100% or 1 over 0, so I don't know how 0 divided by 1 goes, or vice versa. I know it's undefined and it used to be infinity. I don't want to make any math teachers mad though. The point is it's a really big value, right? Because it was something that they weren't buying at all before, and now they are buying this thing. If we take these numbers and put them down into this number line, what we can see is that numbers that are less than 0 are numbers that we call inferior, or goods that we call inferior. So what we're saying is, so let's use our example here, that was the bus pass. An inferior good is something that you're buying, not necessarily because you want it so badly, but it's the best that you can afford. So what we saw is when this person started to make a little bit more money, they can now afford to buy a subway pass instead of a bus pass. So this reveals a relationship between these two goods, but just especially about the bus pass, that the person buying it didn't really like it that much. It wasn't something they really wanted to buy. They just felt like they had to buy it. Here, this value is positive but less than 1, and this is what we're going to call a necessity good. So it's something that they do want to buy more of. We see that they went from 15 pizzas to 16 pizzas, but the proportion is less than what we saw here. For them to have bought 10% more pizzas, that would have been, 1.5 pizzas, and maybe that would have been just more than they felt like was necessary. They would have been too full then. So it's a necessity good, that's a type of normal good. Inferior goods, when your income goes up, you buy less, and vice versa. Normal goods, when your income goes up, you buy more, and vice versa. But we do break normal goods down into two separate categories. So a necessity good, you can see that they're not all that excited about buying more pizza. They buy a little bit more, but not that much more. Much more importantly is what we see here in movies and then in the subway pass itself. You can tell this person really likes movies because they're able to go to 2 a month, and as soon as they get a little bit more money, they increase that to 3 a month. They increase that by 50%. So that's showing that they really value the amount of movies that they're able to see, and it's something they really like. So to this person, going to a movie is a luxury good, a luxury service, as it were. I set this up in this way because it's important to understand that it's not always going to be, a certain good isn't always going to be luxury, necessity, or inferior. And in fact, a certain good isn't always going to be normal or inferior. To most people, food is going to be a normal good, but to some people, maybe they actually start to buy less food the more money they make because, they can eat healthier and maybe they can buy in bulk or something like that, or save money by buying in bulk. Anyway, there's a lot of arguments we can make for that. So just like we saw in PED and XED, we don't ever want to get too locked into calling a good, one thing or another. As always, it depends on the situation. Our last value here, because it's really big, we can't really do a whole lot with it. We know it's way far out there to the right, but that's kind of all we know. Lastly, since it's economics, of course we want to show this on a diagram. So this is back to the example we saw before. So this is our 10% increase in income, and we saw that for the bus pass, we shifted to the left, and that makes it inferior because we had a negative change in quantity demanded. For pizzas, we shifted to the right, but quantity only changes from 15 to 16 at the same price of 5. So this is a necessity good because the percent change in quantity demanded is less than the percent change of income. Finally, for movies, at the price of 10, we went from buying 2 to 3 per month So that's a 50% increase, which makes it a luxury good because 50% is greater than the 10% increase in income. There's a graph called the angle curve that a lot of people will use to illustrate this. Note that on the y-axis, we actually have y, and in this case, y means income. So we're saying as income increases, what happens to quantity? This is a static graph. You don't show any shift of the curve. It's just one curve, and we just go up and down it. So it's answering this question of what happens to a good as income continues to increase over time. So this increase in income we see, maybe it's going to take place over several years. And we are looking at just one product. So if you're making zero money, no income, something like rice, it would be a massive luxury good for you. And if your income was really low, the second your income started to go up, you would really increase the amount of quantity of rice that you bought. So we see that in this first segment of the curve where it's less than 45 degrees. That's saying that for every one increase of income I have a greater than one increase in my quantity. And that's going to produce something less than 45 degrees. Eventually though, as you're making a decent income and you're buying a lot of rice, buying more and more rice becomes sort of, well, I don't really want that much more. So now that rice has turned into a bit of a necessity good, and here we see that it's still positive, the slope of the curve is positive, but now it's greater than 45 degrees. It's more steep than 45 degrees. Finally, rice will get to the point where, well, I'm making enough money now that I don't want to buy rice, I want to buy some better thing, potatoes or bread or something like that. And now we're going to see that as income continues to go up, this person will continue to replace the rice with some sort of good that they view as better. So now this is an inferior good, where it was a normal good down here, and again, a luxury good at first, and then eventually a necessity good. You can think about this with anything. I mean, something to me, I don't know, going on vacation is, kind of a luxury. Maybe go on 2 or 3 vacations a year. If I had a lot of money, I probably would go on about 10 or 15 vacations a year, and when I got an increase in income, I probably wouldn't go on that many more. So at that point, something that one person might consider a luxury, like vacation, has turned into more of a necessity.